The defense needs a former #1 overall pick who is still wrecking games, and that window slammed shut today. The secondary just lost one of its fan favorites and is bringing in pure versatility to replace that spot. And the player who just got the franchise's Courage Award might be on the way out without anybody saying it out loud, while a strategic offensive reunion gives Caleb Williams legit 4.3 speed on the outside. First story. Listen up to this part because what is coming in the next few minutes might end up being one of the biggest free agency moves this franchise can make with what is left on the market. Jadeveon Clowney, the player taken with the first overall pick in the 2014 draft by the Houston Texans, the very first pick in the entire draft, is sitting out there in free agency right now, and the Chicago Bears are being linked to a move to bring that player to this city, and here is the deal. If Ryan Poles lets this shot go by, there's going to have to be a real serious conversation about what this organization's priorities actually are. Let us lay out the context first because this is absolutely critical to understanding why this matters so much for the Bears at this exact moment. Chicago tried to pull off a trade for Max Crosby, and that deal never came together. The team still needs an edge rusher. That need has not gone away with any of the moves Poles has made so far. Montez Sweat is the anchor on that defensive line, and Austin Booker is the in-house option who is still in the development stage. But between Sweat and Booker, there is a massive gap in proven production that this team has to fill if Dennis Allen's defense is going to hit the level the monsters of the Midway tradition demands. So now Jadeveon Clowney hits the market. And here's a straight question. How many times in recent Bears history have we seen such a clean overlap between a glaring roster need and a player who can walk in and plug that hole right away? It has not happened very often. And this feels like one of those windows that if you do not hit it at the right time, closes for good. Now, let us be completely real about who Clowney is in 2026. This is not the same explosive, unblockable force the Texans imagined when they turned in that draft card for the first overall pick. You have to say that plainly without getting sentimental. Clowney never totally lived up to the insane expectations that come with being the very first name called in the draft. But, and this is a huge but, that player has put together a solid, consistent, productive career in a league where lasting more than a decade on the edge is no small thing. Look at last season's numbers with the Dallas Cowboys. 41 tackles and 8.5 sacks. That is the 5th time in that career with 8+ sacks in a single season. That player is 33 years old and still producing on that Dallas defensive line. And the question everyone should be asking right now is this: if that is what that player can do, playing 44% of the Cowboys' defensive snaps, what could happen in a well-managed rotation here in Chicago where the job would not be to play 60 snaps a game, but to come in, do damage, and let everyone else catch a breather? This needs to be said with full conviction. That is exactly the kind of usage that keeps a 33-year-old edge rusher dangerous in the NFL. Do not leave that player out there for every snap. Put that player out there on passing downs, build in enough rest, and let that player do what comes naturally. Get after the quarterback. And the part of this that makes the whole idea borderline irresistible is the price tag. Anthony Miller from Bear Goggles laid it out clearly. The projected number for Clowney is a bit north of $5 million. Chicago has a tick over $10 million in cap space sitting there right now. So here's the question. When was the last time the Bears had a shot to sign a player with that production history at that kind of number? It is hard to remember a moment like that, and that alone should tell you everything about how urgent this move is. Look at what the rest of the NFC North is doing. The Packers are still married to their in-house development model and are not about to reset the market at an impact position. The Vikings are stuck in their own rebuild. And the Lions, the team Chicago has to worry about the most in this division right now, already have a set nasty defensive line. This is Chicago's chance to add a real problem off the edge before OTAs, before the draft, before this window slams shut. Poles, if this message makes it to you, and there is always somebody at Halas Hall checking out this channel, pick up the phone, get Clowney signed. The price is right, the need is real, and the window is right now. If that caught you off guard, wait for what comes next, because while the Bears are trying to shore up the defensive line, the secondary just went through one of the most bittersweet days of this free agency period. with a departure that stings and an arrival that raises a lot of questions. Second story, it happened. Nahshon Wright, the cornerback Chicago fans embraced with a passion nobody really saw coming, the player who grabbed 5 picks last season, the player who flipped games with energy and big-time plays, just signed with the New York Jets. A 1-year deal worth up to $5.5 million. Lock this in. This hurts, and it should hurt. Because Wright was genuinely good for this team and in that jersey, but at the same time, and this is where you have to be brutally objective, this is exactly the scenario Brad Biggs laid out almost word for word just a few hours ago. The market did not give Wright the big-time number that was being chased, and in the end, that player landed a 1-year deal with the Jets that, while respectable, is nowhere close to the long-term contract that would have been preferred. That pretty much confirms everything analysts were saying about the limitations of that market after just one high-end season on the resume. Let us talk about what Wright actually did in Chicago, because that history deserves a fair look. 5 interceptions, 2 forced fumbles, 80 tackles. A Pro Bowl nod. Those are numbers from a corner who was a real, tangible part of what this team tried to build last season. And the city of Chicago showed real love for that level of play. But the NFL is a business, and when the numbers do not fit in terms of cap space and long-term planning, paths split. Now comes the fascinating part of this storyline. The Bears did not just sit around and wait to see how Wright's situation worked itself out. Almost immediately, basically in lockstep with the news of Wright landing in New York, came confirmation that Chicago is bringing in Cam Lewis, former Buffalo Bills defensive back, on a 2-year deal. Jeremy Fowler from ESPN broke it, and what was said about Lewis is exactly why this move makes sense inside what Dennis Allen wants to run. Fowler described that player as a versatile piece who lined up at corner, safety, and nickel over 6 seasons in Buffalo. So here's the question. In a modern NFL defense where versatility in the secondary is one of the most valuable weapons a coordinator can have, what does it mean to sign a player who can legitimately function at 3 different spots? It means Dennis Allen is building exactly the kind of flexibility that lets a defense spin coverages in ways that mess with opposing quarterbacks. Look at Lewis's numbers with Buffalo last season. 99 snaps at free safety, 145 in the nickel, and 170 in the box. That is a player, a defensive coordinator trusted enough to move all over the back end depending on what the game called for. And for a Bears secondary that is still under construction, that is exactly the kind of depth piece you need while the team keeps hunting for higher impact talent at other spots. Lewis is 28 and comes out of 6 years in a winning program like the Bills. That player knows what it means to prep for playoff games, understands what it takes to operate inside demanding, complex defensive systems, and knows exactly how hard you have to work to hold a roster spot in an NFL that has zero sympathy for anyone who is not fully prepared. Lewis personally broke that down in an interview with WGRZ TV in Buffalo, talking about how intense the week-to-week prep is when you are asked to handle multiple positions in a modern defense. But here's the straight talk Bears fans deserve about where this really leaves the secondary. Lewis is a depth signing, a role player who can help right away, but not a one-for-one replacement for the game-changing playmaking Wright brought when that player was rolling. Wright's exit leaves a hole in the swing-the-whole-game play department that Lewis, because of the player profile, is not going to fill the same way. That is not a knock on Lewis. It is just the reality of what each of these players is. And if Packers fans are watching from up in Green Bay, and there are always some who lurk on this channel just to see what is going on in Chicago, here is the message. The Bears secondary is still a work in progress, but it is a project being handled with a clear plan and real football sense about what Dennis Allen needs to make this scheme work. That inspires more confidence than the kind of reckless spending other franchises have thrown at the secondary in recent years. But here is where the day gets really wild for Bears fans. Because while the secondary is riding its own roller coaster of exits and arrivals, there is news involving one of the fan favorites that could end in a way that is a lot less storybook than anyone would hope for a player who just picked up the franchise's Courage Award. Third story. There are two storylines in this last block that look very different on the surface, but in reality tell the exact same story about how roster building works in the modern NFL. One is about a player who won over Chicago's heart in a way very few outside free agents ever managed to do. And the other confirms an offensive addition with a strategic layer that goes way beyond the $5.1 million contract number in the headline. Let us start with Andrew Billings, and Bears fans need to really lock in on this part. Billings was just named the Bears recipient of the Ed Block Courage Award for the 2025 season. ESPN's Courtney Cronin confirmed it. For anyone who's not familiar with it, that award is about as personal and human as it gets from an NFL franchise, because it is not about stats or box score production. It honors the player who best embodies courage, compassion, commitment, and service to the community. Ryan Poles laid it out plainly when describing Billings. Professionalism, reliability, toughness. Those were not just throwaway press conference words from the Bears GM. That was someone who has seen up close what this player means inside the building. And right when the city is celebrating that recognition, the business side of football barges in without knocking. Billings is a free agent this offseason, and everything points to the Bears heading in another direction at defensive tackle. On day one of free agency, Chicago signed Neville Gallimore, former Indianapolis Colts tackle, to a 2-year, $12 million deal. And while that move does not completely slam the door on Billings coming back, it does send a very clear signal about where the organization's priorities sit at that spot. So here is the honest question. What happened with Billings' performance last season that makes this situation understandable even though it hurts? The numbers tell a story that cannot just be waved away. Pro Football Focus gave Billings a grade of 38.7 for the 2025 season, ranking that player 130, first out of 134 graded defensive linemen. 12 pressures across an entire season for a team that desperately needed interior pressure and disruptive force inside. Those numbers flat out were not enough. A lot of fans are going to hate hearing that, because Billings is the kind of player you win with from a personality standpoint, from the way that presence shows up in the locker room, from the quiet but real leadership that shapes a winning culture. But you cannot build an NFL roster on that alone. You need production on Sundays, and last year Billings did not deliver at the level Chicago's defense required. The hope, and hope is the right word here, is that maybe Poles finds a way to bring Billings back on a short, low-cost deal as a depth piece. Because losing that presence entirely in the locker room carries a cultural cost that will never show up on a cap sheet, but that any experienced coach will tell you is absolutely real. Now let us talk about Calif Raymond, and this move deserves a lot more attention than the headlines are giving it. The Bears have locked in the wide receiver and return specialist on a 1-year, $5.1 million contract, according to Ian Rappaport from NFL Network and Mike Garafolo, and the key word in this move is reunion. Raymond is coming to Chicago to reunite with Ben Johnson, that player's offensive coordinator in Detroit, and Antwan Randall L., who coached the receivers during that same stretch in the Motor City. Here's something that matters a lot more than people think. When an offensive coordinator with Ben Johnson's reputation lands with a new team and immediately starts surrounding the franchise quarterback with players that coordinator already worked with, players whose tendencies are already wired into that coordinator's brain, players that can be trusted when the game is on the line, that coordinator is building a system with layers of trust you will not find in any stat sheet. But that anyone who watched those Lions offenses under Johnson can recognize instantly. Raymond has a 40 time in the 4-3 range. 4-3. That gives Caleb Williams a legit deep threat this team badly needed after DJ Moore headed to Buffalo. And on special teams, we're talking about a 2-time All-Pro return specialist who can give the Bears a field position edge that flips close games. Anyone who has watched enough Bears football over the years knows that a 20-yard swing in field position can be the difference between lining up for a game-winning field goal and punting out of the back of the end zone. The Lions are going to feel this one in a very personal way because nobody knows better than Detroit what Raymond can do in Ben Johnson's system. And while Detroit watches from up north as Chicago keeps stacking pieces around Caleb Williams to set up that second-year leap as a starter, There has to be a growing level of discomfort in that building that the national media has not really picked up on yet. Rome Odunze, Luther Burden III, and now Khalif Raymond. Three totally different profiles. Three different ways to attack a defense, and Caleb Williams at the center of that whole arsenal with Ben Johnson at the wheel. So one more question, does anyone really think this offense is done being built, or are there more moves on the way? It feels like more is coming, and the best pieces might not even be on the board yet. Bears fans, that is the end of a day that just went into the books as one of the most loaded news days of this free agency stretch so far. Before this video wraps, there is one specific thing you need to do. Head down to the comments right now and let it rip. First question, and this is the big one. Jadeveon Clowney, former first overall pick, 8.5 sacks last year, projected price tag north of $5 million, and Chicago has the cap room to make it happen. Should the Bears lock that deal in right now, or should Poles wait to see what the draft brings before committing resources at that spot? Drop your take in the comments because this is exactly the kind of decision that can swing entire seasons. Second question, Wright is headed to the Jets, and the Bears answered by bringing in Cam Lewis on a 2-year deal. Are you good with that response, or do you feel like the organization should have pushed harder to keep the corner this city fell in love with last season? Put your most direct thoughts out there, because there are a lot of mixed feelings in the fan base about how this played out. And third question, Andrew Billings, the Ed Block Courage Award, 3 seasons in Chicago, and now a situation where a return looks less and less likely. Does Billings deserve a different kind of send-off than the one this is shaping up to be? Should Poles find a way to bring that player back, even in a reduced role? Or is it time for Chicago to look ahead with Gallimore and whatever the draft brings? Being a Chicago Bears fan has demanded a level of patience most other NFL fan bases would not fully understand. There were the Trubisky disappointments, the Matt Nagy era, watching Roquan Smith walk, seeing Khalil Mack shipped out, but there has also been the arrival of Caleb Williams, the hiring of Ben Johnson, and the start of a rebuild that, for the first time in a long time, feels like it is being executed with a clear, coherent vision. And that process, that road back to the monsters of the Midway this city deserves, is built on exactly the kind of moves and debates we're talking about today. This channel is here to walk with you every step of that road, to break down every move, to celebrate every win, to call out every decision that does not add up, and to be a voice for Bears fans who deserve deep, passionate, honest coverage of their team. If you are not part of this family yet, this is the time to fix that. Hit subscribe right now. Turn on notifications because this free agency run is not done, and the next few hours could drop news even more explosive than anything you heard today. Hit like on this video if you think Poles has to sign Clowney before this window closes. Share it with that friend who still has no idea everything that is going down with the Bears right now. And if you see things differently from any of my takes on the 3 stories we covered, get in the comments because this channel is built on passionate, respectful debate from a community that loves this team more than anything. Bear down, Chicago. The Windy City does not back down, and neither do these Bears. See you in the next video, family. This is Miguel Morales, and this is Bear Truth.